Hello there, friends and enemies. Konami's approach to game design in Yu-Gi-Oh! Is one of my favorite things about the game. Not only does it try to incorporate some new elements of gameplay every once in a while by adding a new mechanic, such as Synchro XC's Pendulum and Link monsters, but more noticeably within the last 5 to 10 years, they've taken a look at all of their cards and said, what are the possibilities that we can do with these cards and with the field to make the game a little more fun? Yu-Gi-Oh! Has become less about what cards can we incorporate and more about how can we incorporate our cards more thematically. I feel like this is shown in a very fun way in archetypes like Time Thief and Nimlaria, being very themed around a specific type of thing that they do. I really enjoy when game designers think a little bit out of the box for their card design like this. It's part of the reason why D-Spirits is one of my favorite indie games right now, because it kind of has this design philosophy a little bit, and even a little bit is enough to get my goat going. And so with Magic the Gathering being the prime example of modern card games kickstarting almost every card game that we've seen since its release, I wanted to talk about unsets. If you don't know, unsets in Magic the Gathering are joke sets. There are 4 mainline unsets, technically 5 if you want to count unsanctioned. I don't. All of which are centered around the design philosophy of making fun of Magic the Gathering. The first unset Unglued was a pretty small set and it did a decent job of making fun of Magic cards, but it didn't quite have the same feel that other Magic the Gathering sets do. You can tell that they were kind of just throwing jokes out and not really thinking too much about set design. However, where Wizards of the Coast really kicked off was with their second unset, Unhinged, coming out in 2004, 6 years after Unglued. Unhinged does more than just joke about Magic's game design. It actually does what I was talking about with Yu-Gi-Oh! It takes Magic card design or color design and says, what can we do with this? In essence, their introduction of certain joke mechanics in Unhinged really pushed the way that Magic the Gathering works to a different level. Effects focused on things that weren't just on the cards, they focused on things that your opponent would do or things that your opponent would wear, things that your opponent might even say. Unhinged introduced us to the gotcha mechanic, which I think was a really fun card design because it requires your opponent to think about what they say, and if they happen to forget or slip up, that gives you an edge over them. Unhinged game design would actually go on to influence the other unsets that would come out later on, being a harbinger of those types of things that actually care about the way that you and your opponent interact with the game, and maybe even other people. Unhinged used these mechanics to set a precedent for unsets, where it didn't just make fun of the game of Magic the Gathering, it made fun of the players and how they interact with not only the game, but also each other. One of my favorite examples of this is Booster Tutor, that requires you to buy a pack of Magic cards. However, after Unhinged came out, silence. Magic went about just doing its normal thing for years, over a decade. And yes, it would incorporate some mechanics from Unhinged and change them just a little bit and turn them into real cards, but overall, unsets were thought to be dead. And then after 13 long years, we got what I believe to be the epitome of unsets. Unstable released in 2017, and it was a fantastic look at the philosophy of game design and how to break it. It took concepts introduced in Unhinged, like interacting with your opponent, and ramped it up just that much more, to where you were interacting with people that weren't even part of the game. And it didn't matter if people knew how to play Magic or not, you could force them into your game of Magic if you wanted to. Force is being used loosely there, don't take that as a solid. And not just that, but Unstable's design philosophy was built around factions. Each color or combination of colors would have a specific faction assigned to them, and then the design of those cards would be thought about based on how that faction worked. Agents of Sneak stealing things from your opponent, including timings on their turns and even phases of their turns. The Order of the Widget and the Goblin Explosioneers, both of which make contraptions, but also both of which have completely opposing tendencies, with Goblin Explosioneers being high damage dealers and Order of the Widget constantly trying to improve themselves. You have the League of Dastardly Doom, which was a bunch of supervillains that had a bunch of different crazy effects that did a bunch of things. And then you had Crossbreed Labs, which, just like in its name, would splice together creatures. It was insane card design, and of course it didn't have all of the good things. Unhinged still had great cards that did a lot of great things, but Unstable was just unmatched in the amount of things that it could figure out how to do. And while of course it pulled some of its mechanical prowess from Unhinged, it still kept itself feeling fresh and new. It felt like an improvement on the Unformula in a very specific way that we hadn't seen since Unhinged. And it's because of this that we get into the real subject of the video. Unfinity was the fourth unset announced late in 2021. Over the course of the next year, the updates for this set would tell us that it was a space carnival. It was exciting and it was really fun to think about, but there was a problem. Unsets in Magic usually have silver borders, meaning that the border of the card is a silver color rather than a black color like normal Magic cards. In revealing information about Unfinity, Wizards announced that this would be going away, that all cards would be black border from now on, but cards that were meant to be would simply have an acorn sticker at the bottom. Now, we aren't here to talk about the semantics of that, but I am here to talk about how that destroyed Unfinity's game design. Of course, being an unset, it did have fun cards. I'm not here to say that it didn't. Some of these cards were crazy fun, and so much to do with design philosophy, having you call people outside of the game, having you add things that shouldn't be possible to add to the game state. It was fun all around, but only for those few cards. You see, in getting rid of Silver Border, the goal of Wizards of the Coast was to make an unset that wasn't just Silver Border, but also had Black Border cards that could be converted from into regular Magic play. And herein lies the problem, where Unfinity felt like a set that was just designed to be Black Border. Yeah, some of these things are silly, but they're obviously not meant to push the boundaries of Magic the Gathering. They're just meant to bring more fun cards into regular standard Magic play. And in this way, kind of just destroys the idea of unsets as a whole. You can even look at the Magic the Gathering card database and see that there are more Black Border cards in Unfinity than there are Acorn cards. Now, being posed as a space carnival, there were so many possibilities that they could have done to make a full realized unset. It's not like they could have possibly run out of ideas. Personally speaking, I enjoyed stickers, but I understand why most people didn't. I also enjoyed attractions because I thought there were better versions of contraptions, but the problem with them is that most of them just feel like standard Magic cards, and the ones that are meant to be uncards, the Acorn cards, don't feel like they stretch that line all that much. Being set in a carnival could have given them that design space to really ramp up interactions with your opponents and how that would affect the game state of both players' boards. Carnivals have competitive games like Water Gun Balloon Game, which is an actual Magic card, but you could have made more games like that that would require you and your opponent to do something outside of the cards together, and then maybe whoever wins gets a card from the opponent's field or something like that. You could have had plenty cards set in a space where both players would have the opportunity to win the game, and attractions could have felt like an attraction by having you physically do something or having something happen with your cards that would make it feel like a fun carnival attraction. However, it feels like this design is flipped away for something like stickers, or worse yet, hats. I really didn't like hats in Unfinity, but let's not talk about that for now. Attractions, stickers, and hats were the 3 new mechanics brought into Unfinity, and one of them is just an improvement on a previous thing, and the other thing is simply an arts matters type of deal, which is something that we've seen in unsets before. And again, not saying that you can't utilize old mechanics, but if you're going to do something like that, I feel like you should make it be something that matters. If you have a space carnival going on, make the arts matters thing into a game. Make the players search for something in the art. I've wanted to talk about Unfinity since it released, and I haven't really found the correct way to do that yet until now. I'm not sure that this video makes much sense with the way that I presented, but I feel like Unfinity has lost the game design philosophy of unsets, and with Mark Rosewater telling us that if Unfinity didn't do well, then unsets probably weren't going to happen again, it seems likely, in my opinion, that we may not get unsets again. And if we do, they aren't going to really be unsets. It's just going to be black border cards that are a little more fun than usual. Anyway, that was all. I know that this video started out kind of weird, but I initially wanted to talk about specifically just game design, but I also wanted to talk about how upset I was about Unfinity, and that kind of just became what the video was about. Thank you so much for watching. I apologize that this one was a little bit longer than I expected it to be, and probably you expected it to be, but I hope you found something to enjoy about the video, and thank you so much for watching once again. Until next time, drink your water.